Back on the 16th of January 2023, at approximately 9:35 a.m., a 60-year-old man by the name of Andrea Bonafede was taken away by the police in a private clinic where he was undergoing chemotherapy for his colon cancer. The other patients erupted in cheers and applause. One high-fived the policeman. Others hugged the police. Some even teared up. The clinic was surrounded by over 100 members of the armed forces. What could this poor old cancer patient have done to elicit such a response? A colonel from the Carabinieri, Italy's militarized police, walked towards him and asked, "Are you Matteo Messina Denaro?" "You know who I am," the patient wearily said. He wasn't just some poor old man. Andrea Bonafede was a mere alias. His real name was Matteo Messina Denaro, nicknamed Diabolic or Usiku, or the Skinny One, Il Capo dei Capi, or the boss of the bosses of the Mafia, a man who has been hiding as a fugitive for 30 years. Considered the last godfather of the Sicilian Mafia and one of the world's most wanted criminals, Matteo had been living in Campobello di Mazara, a small Sicilian municipality, near his hometown of Castelvetrano, where his mother lived. One would think that someone like him would be hiding in the most remote part of the world. But he hung out at the local bar San Vito, bought his groceries himself, and even ate his dinner at a pizzeria regularly. The principle of omerta, the code of silence, has protected the mafia boss for all those years. Nobody was willing to betray him. "He's a good man. It was a mistake to arrest him," a resident of Castelvetrano has even said. But what exactly did he do 30 years ago, and where has he been for all that time? Matteo's fate as a mafia boss seemed to have been sealed since his birth. His father was Francesco Messina Denaro, also known as Don Ciccio, the capo mandamento, or the head of the territory of Castelvetrano, in the province of Trapani, Sicily. He was a protege of Salvatore Riina, chief of the Sicilian Mafia. Matteo was exposed to organized crime at an early age, and by 14, he already knew how to shoot a gun. Since then, Matteo became active in the international drug trade, taking the attention of the FBI and the US. He built a wide extortion racket that forced businesses to pay a pizzo, or protection money, and skimmed off public construction contracts. Crime ran in his family. Other than his father, his brother Salvatore was also a mafioso, arrested in 2010 but refused to testify against Matteo. His younger sister Patrizia, another member of the Mafia, was arrested in 2013, and his older sister Rosalia would be arrested in March 2023. It was in 1992 when Matteo's whole life took a drastic turn. The Maxi trial, the largest trial in world history that began on the 10th of February 1986, was about to end. The conflict between the Italian state and the Cosa Nostra, or the Sicilian Mafia, came to a violent head. Prosecutors led by investigators Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino indicted 475 mafiosi for many crimes that would take too much time to list down here. The two successfully convinced former mafia bosses, in particular Tommaso Buscetta and Salvatore Contorno, to turn as state witnesses, also known as pentiti, to offer their testimonies as evidence. In the most important trial ever against the Sicilian Mafia, the Supreme Court of Italy upheld the convictions back on the 30th of January 1992. 338 were convicted and sentenced to a total of 2,665 years, excluding the life sentences handed against 19 mafia bosses. For the first time, the existence of the Cosa Nostra was officially and judicially revealed. But the Mafia will not go down quietly. Their political protector, Salvo Lima, was executed on the 12th of March 1992. The Mafia felt that he failed to protect them from the Maxi trial. On the 23rd of May 1992, a bomb exploded on Highway A29, close to the junction of Capaci, Sicily, killing Italian judge and prosecuting magistrate Giovanni Falcone, his wife, and their 3 bodyguards. His death was orchestrated by boss Salvatore Riina, an ally of Matteo. The Direzione Investigative Anti-Mafia, a body whose main task is to fight the Mafia, intercepted Mafia members Antonino Gioe, Santino Di Matteo, and Gioacchino La Barbera, who were heard on phone calls talking about the Capaci bombing. Gioe committed suicide while the 2 others became pentiti, revealing the names of the other perpetrators. But Matteo, among other mafiosi, abducted Santino's son Giuseppe to keep the rat quiet. The poor 12-year-old boy was kept in a cage, beaten up and underfed, before being ultimately strangled after 779 days of hostage back on the 11th of January 1996. His body was dissolved in acid to make sure the corpse would never be found, a practice often called lupara bianca. But Santino still cooperated with the state. In 1997, he met one of the perpetrators, Enzo Brusca, during court proceedings. He burst into tears and said to the judge, "I guarantee my collaboration, but to this animal I guarantee nothing. If you leave me alone with him for 2 minutes, I'll cut off his head." On the 19th of July 1992, 57 days after the Capaci bombing, a bomb exploded in Via D'Amelio in Palermo, killing Italian judge and prosecuting magistrate Paolo Borsellino and 5 members of his police escort. Matteo was also instrumental in the planning of this bombing. Borsellino carried a red notebook called Agenda Rosa, where he wrote down details of his investigations. Carabinieri officer Rosario Farinella said later that he gave the Agenda Rosa to Giuseppe Ayala, the first Palermo magistrate who arrived at the scene. But Ayala said that he refused it since he lacked the authority to receive it, but he changed the story later on and said that he did take it but then gave it to another Carabinieri officer. Later on in 2006, a video showing the Carabinieri captain Arcangeli holding the Agenda Rosa aired in news on Italian state channel Rai 1. We could speculate, but there was plenty of intrigue surrounding that notebook. A year later, the terror attacks continued. On the 15th of January 1993, Salvatore Rina was captured at his villa in Palermo after being a fugitive for 23 years. TV journalist Maurizio Costanzo expressed his delight at the arrest. As a consequence, a bomb exploded on the 14th of May 1993 as he drove down a Rome street. He survived, but 23 people were injured. On the 27th of May 1993, as a warning to mafiosi to not turn as state's witness, another bomb exploded outside the Uffizi Gallery in Via dei Giorgofili in Florence, destroying 3 works of art and killing 5 people, which included a 9-year-old girl, Nadia Nencioni, and her 2-month-old sister, Caterina Nencioni. 48 other people were injured in the blast. On the 27th of July 1993, another bomb exploded outside a contemporary art gallery in Via Palestro, near the Galleria d'Arte Moderna in Milan, then 2 in Rome, going off just before and shortly after midnight, killing 5 people in Milan and injuring 13 in Rome. Matteo was convicted of all these crimes, but only in absentia, since he has gone into hiding since June 1993. Now what happened from 1993 to 2023? Investigators have said that between 1994 and 1995, Matteo was hiding with his lover Maria Mezzi, not just in Sicily, but also in Greece, where he traveled under the alias Matteo Cracolici. In 2000, Maria was arrested. Her love letters with Matteo were seized by the police. A year after arrest, she was sentenced to 3 years in prison for aiding and abetting Matteo, together with her brother Francesco Mezzi. Other letters were uncovered in July 2006 at the home of Filippo Guttadauro, the husband of Matteo's sister Rosalia. Filippo was meant to deliver the letters to his brother-in-law Matteo. After Matteo's arrest, Maria was once again questioned. When his father Francesco Messina Denaro died in November 1998, Matteo eventually became the capo mandamento of the area, including Castelvetrano and its neighboring cities. Vincenzo Virga, on the other hand, ruled the city of Trapani and its surroundings. But upon Virga's arrest in 2001, Matteo took over his position. Even in hiding, he managed to command some 900 men and even reorganized the 20 mafia families in Trapani into one single mandamento or district. On May 2002, he was sentenced to life imprisonment for the bombings in Milan and Rome back in 1993. Unfortunately, he was sentenced in absentia. Giusy Vitale, the sister of mafia bosses Leonardo, Michele, and Vito Vitale, a pentita or a state witness, has said back in 1998 that Matteo was one of the younger bosses within Cosa Nostra who were planning to put aside Bernardo Provenzano, the chief of the Corleonesi mafia clan. Provenzano was eventually arrested back on the 11th of April 2006. When it came to succeeding Provenzano, Matteo rivaled Salvatore Lo Piccolo, boss of the Mandamento of San Lorenzo Palermo, and Domenico Raculia, the boss of Altofonte Palermo. But Salvatore was eventually arrested back on the 5th of November 2007, and Domenico followed him to prison on the 15th of November 2009. Matteo's main rivals for the position have now been disposed of, but everything has started to crack around Matteo more and more. The supermarket king of Sicily, Giuseppe Grigoli, was arrested back in December 2007 when authorities uncovered documents in Provenzano's hideout linking him to Matteo. The supermarket king was able to launder illicit profits for the Cosa Nostra, giving them a cover for their trading. Hundreds of people close to the Cosa Nostra were able to get jobs under him. A year later, on the 18th of November 2008, the authorities seized 700 million euros in assets from Grigoli, traceable to Matteo. Tiny paper scrap messages found in Provenzano's hideout revealed that Matteo knew the accounts of Grigoli's supermarkets down to the tiniest detail. More money launderers followed. In November 2009, 200 million euros was seized from construction tycoon Francesco Pecora. In January 2010, authorities seized various assets from the Sicilian construction magnate Rosario Cascio, all amounting to 550 million euros. Overall, about 1.4 billion euros were seized. But on September 2010, that value was eventually topped. The authorities seized a record amount of assets worth 1.5 billion euros from Sicilian wind farm businessman Vito Nicastri, known as the King of Wind, for bankrolling the Mafia's most wanted fugitive. By taking away all this money, the authorities were slowly drying up the funds that had apparently let Matteo keep his luxurious lifestyle. Italy was getting closer and closer to capturing Matteo, but it seemed the Mafia boss kept getting warned of the authorities approaching over and over again. Salvatore Messina Denaro has just been arrested months ago, back on the 15th of March 2010. He, along with 18 others, was part of a networking surrounding his brother, charged with organizing Matteo's secret correspondence. On the 19th of May 2011, the police surrounded a manor farm near Castelvetrano. The Secret Service AISI tipped them that Matteo was hiding there, but the Mafia boss was nowhere to be found. In 2012, Matteo was formally sentenced to life imprisonment, together with 4 other suspects, for the murder of Giuseppe Di Matteo, the poor young boy dissolved in acid back in 1996. Unfortunately, he was still sentenced in absentia. But the authorities got closer to him in December 2014. The police seized 20 million euros of his assets from Matteo's olive groves in Trapani. 3 years later, in December 2017, over 200 officers had search warrants at properties owned by 30 mafiosi around Castelvetrano, Matteo's hometown. But Matteo was still not found during the manhunt. Another 1.5 billion euros of assets, real estate and tourism properties were seized in November 2018. It belonged to the heirs of Mafia boss Carmelo Patti, who died back in January 2016. None of it was going to Matteo anymore. For another sad sentencing, on the 20th of October 2020, Matteo was sentenced, again in absentia, to life imprisonment for the bombings in Capaci and Via D'Amelio that killed Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino. Back on the 10th of September 2021, Dutch news had falsely reported that Matteo might have been arrested in a restaurant 2 days earlier. Italy had issued an international arrest warrant. An innocent British man from Liverpool was sadly mistaken for the Mafia boss. He must have been shocked when heavily armed police officers stormed his meal, cuffing and blindfolding him. The man was actually just there to watch the Formula 1 race. On the 30th of September 2021, the Italian state-owned television channel TG2 revealed the first known video of Matteo. The authorities were actually close to seizing Matteo back in December 2009. It was from a security camera around Valle del Belice in Sicily. Inside a Mitsubishi Pajero, Matteo was sitting in the passenger seat. Not long after, in October 2021, around 150 police officers got involved in a series of searches for a manhunt against Matteo across Sicily. Now, finally, 2023 arrived. Italy is closing in on Matteo. There has been a debate about whether Matteo Messina Denaro was arrested or if he let himself be arrested. Some have said that Giuseppe Graviano, one of the suspects in the bombings and the death of Giuseppe Di Matteo, sent one of his men 2 months ago before Matteo was arrested to announce to the whole of the country, on television, that Matteo was seriously ill and was going to let himself be arrested in exchange for letting other mafia bosses out of prison. Matteo seemed to have put his guard down. He had been making the mistakes of using cell phones, taking selfies, chatting on WhatsApp, and using documents that belonged to the relatives of other mafia bosses. But sources from the investigation have denied these speculations. Antonio Dali, son of the founder of Banca Sicola, from the family that Matteo's father Francesco worked for, got arrested in December 2022. This arrest could be linked to Matteo, since 1 month later, he followed him to prison. The documents found by the police from Matteo didn't seem to have any answers for what happened during the last 30 years of his life as a fugitive. On the night of his arrest, Matteo was transferred to the prison of L'Aquila, which had an oncology ward where he could continue his cancer treatment. In his prison, Matteo had his first interrogation with the Italian magistrates, back on the 14th of February 2023. None of his statements have been leaked to the press, but nothing important was said to have been shared. His niece, a notorious defender of the Mafia, had been appointed as his lawyer. There was hope that he might cooperate with the authorities and reveal the crimes of the Mafia during his years as a fugitive. Perhaps he could corroborate whatever was in Borsellino's Agenda Rosa. But that hope has slowly disappeared. The hope that the organization will be defeated has slowly disappeared as well.